Welcome to Stay a While, the podcast that's virtual soul food for your ears. I am your host, Tommy Vincent, and each week we break bread with bold, passionate women who have faced the impossible and are still standing to share their testimonies. Make yourself at home and stay a while. Hi, everyone. It's Tommy Vincent, your host of Stay a While podcast. And today, joining me at the table, we have Laura Okmin. Laura, welcome to the table today. I am so excited for our conversation. Before we get into it, let me just let the folks know who we have joining us today. Such a powerhouse, such a woman who has made her mark in the wide world of sports. Laura has over 30 years covering some of the biggest names in sports on the biggest stages. She is a communications coach, and she had the opportunity to have some of the most interesting conversations on the sidelines from sport to sport, and we are delighted to have her at the table today. Welcome, Laura.
I'm so excited. I'm so honored. I'm so delighted. I'm trying to put my arms around the table right now. I'm so excited. I'm just so excited to be a part of this and have a conversation with you, Tommy.
Yes, thank you for being here. And before we get into questions, the very first thing I want to understand is, who is Laura Okmin?
It's so funny because if you would have asked me that maybe 15 years ago, I'm going to say right before I was 40. If you asked me about 15 years ago, I would have taken about 35 seconds and I would have listed my bio. And I would have told you where I started, where I went to from there, and where I am now. And every single thing about my who would have been my job. And now what I would tell you is who I am is a woman way past a shrinking window that she was told she had. A woman on TV, a woman talking sports. I was told after 30, you better start looking for a new career. And then I was told after 40, you better start looking for a new career. So here I am north of 50, and who I am is a woman madly in love with her second act. A woman who was told that it gets worse. A woman who was told that you won't know who you are after 50. No one's going to want to hear who you are. And who I am is a woman who is madly in love with my husband I met later in life, with opportunities that I keep getting in my life, and being at this age, at this moment in my life. As I'm sitting here thinking about that, and I never mentioned my job or sports once. And I think that for me says that I've been doing the work I needed to get to this age.
When you look back at that journey that you've been on to where you are today, how did you use those no's and all of that negative talk that people were asserting onto you as stepping stones versus as barriers preventing you from where you desire to be in your career?
I love that you made it sound like it was the past, because I would say I still get those, right? Like that, you think that all of a sudden you get to this point in your life where you go, look at me, I beat sexism. And then all of a sudden ageism is just standing around the corner waiting to punch you in the face. And comes a whole new conversation, new no's for a different reason. And I just know that the first no that I really heard was when I was in college and I took a sports broadcasting class, and 33, 34 years ago, and there were very few women in sports. And I told my advisor I wanted to do something in sports broadcasting, and he said, that's crazy. A woman can't do that. And Tommy, I had no confidence. I had none. So I don't know how in the world, but somewhere way back in that little, that young Laura brain, for some reason, future me said, that's not acceptable. And I walked out of that office and said to him, you just met your next one. Because he said, I don't have any. And I said, you just met the one, the one, not the next one. And I think for whatever reason at that moment, I just was like, that's not right. And I'm going to spend the rest of my career proving that not only can I get in this business, but I can stay in this business. And I still say that, saying, honest to God, I had no confidence till I was 40, because I think at some point, all those no's and all those people telling you, I don't care what you say. I don't want to hear what you say. Women in sports, like nobody wants you here. I think at some point that becomes your voice. So for so long, I didn't think I knew what I was talking about. I had to prove. I had to prove I knew what I was talking about. And at some point that became my head, and that became my brain and my voice. And once I was 40, my work truly began, of going, how do I make sure that the voice in my head is a positive one, that truly is my fan and my best friend and my support system, because I hadn't had it. And so 40 changed everything for me, of going, how do I make a new voice? How do I make a new voice in my head that's louder than all the negative ones that I had been having for 20 years?
What is a pep talk that you give to yourself when those voices start rising up? Because to your point, that stuff shows up differently.
Yeah.
It may come now a different way, but it still does show up. And as someone who is seasoned, who has experience, there's a new talk that you can give to yourself to help you beat those voices down. So what is a talk that Laura has with herself?
It's funny because I'll never forget this. This is such a core memory for me. When I was doing that work, and you know how people are always like, so I did some work to make my voice confident, and it's like, that kind of skips over all the work that it took, which was a lot. And one of the exercises that I would do was right before I went live on TV before a kick, and the camera comes on you have 30 seconds. And I struggled a lot then because the voices in my ear, literally, the men talking to me, weren't positive and weren't supportive. And so I had that kind of in my head of feeling like I was kind of being pushed down, and the voice in my head was telling me, you're probably going to screw this up. And so what I started realizing was every time I was about to push myself, I was about to do something that I needed my confidence, I was talking myself down. So I started going, gosh, every time I'm going, you can really mess up in front of millions of people. You can really look stupid. Here's where you're probably going to screw up. Like, you could literally feel me just going down the rabbit hole. So my first assignment to myself was changing that voice to talking me up. And so what I would do about 3 minutes before I went live, I'd take 2 steps away from my camera by myself, and I would just start telling myself I was going to crush it. And you're going to do great. And I would picture, people at home, my friends, texting me and going, crushed it. I pictured, and I kept talking about how well I was going to do, which that was very new to me. And the first time that I really did that, I was standing there and just looking down and talking myself up. And all of a sudden, a man walked by me on the field, just walked by and like double took. And he turned around and he goes to me, hey, don't mean to interrupt, but whatever you're thinking about, it looks good on you. And he walked away. And that was the time I realized how you change when you talk yourself up. Me sitting there saying, you got this, you're great at this, you're going to crush this. When I talk like that, my shoulders go back. Like, I bop a little bit. Like, I have that confidence, right? And it was the first time that I realized how your entire body and face change when you tell yourself how amazing you are, when you talk yourself up. So I teach this to all these young women that I mentor and I coach, and we do confidence drills, and we go around the room and talk about a moment that was that moment for you. And we think about it and we look at each other and ourselves of how we change when we're talking about it. And a long way of answering your question, because now all these young women will say, well, what do you think about? What do you do when you're talking yourself up? And what I always say now, Tommy, is I don't have to think about anything. I just am now. Like, I don't have to tell myself, I know I'm going to crush it, even when I don't. I know how prepared I am. I know how confident I am. I know how valuable my voice is. I know how seasoned I am. I know all of this. And so what I would say is now it's, 30s was about figuring out my voice. 40s was really trying to step into it. And 50s is fully being that voice now. And I love that you smile. It tells me like you get that. So I would say now my head is probably really still when I do things that I need to really like work up for, because it just allows me to just kind of be in my confident place and fully feel all the lessons and all the growth and step into that. Does that make sense?
It definitely makes sense. And, you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording, and we talked about how there is this generation now that has the opportunity to really benefit from the stories of people who have been there, done that, and are excelling in that. And I know I heard you having a conversation before in another recording, and you talked about how you didn't have women to look to that were getting older and really growing in their career. And I thought, well, here's someone who has over 30 years of experience. Now you're that woman. You're that woman that someone can look to, and they see you not only as a woman in sports, but they see you aging well in sports and still standing firm, flat footed, doing your thing and excelling at what you're doing. So there's an example now of somebody that they can look to. And so I recognize we didn't have the benefit of a lot of conversations with a lot of women who are doing some of the things that we're doing now. But I also own that I now can be that voice for someone else that is working their way through life and really trying to identify their voice, assume their power and authority in the fields that they've been called to, because this shows up in every industry. This is not just women in sports. It's when you're really just trying to understand, who am I really and what value do I bring to the table so that I can show up authentically as me and I can really impact the world while I'm here. So when you think about that and you think about the work that you're doing as a mentor, and I want you to talk about GALvanize as well, what does that weight feel like now, knowing that you are that woman that you were looking for?
Probably the biggest compliment you can give me. It's, you usually create what you wish you had. And so that was the impetus of GALvanize. Was I would have killed to have young women around me when I was a young woman. I would have killed to have other women to say, how are you handling this? And I made a mistake, and I'm judging myself harshly, like, can you help me? Can you love me out of this? And I would have loved to have helped someone else on her journey. And so I feel like my mom died young, and my mom was vibrant and beautiful and just turned 50. And so she was just hitting her peak. My mom had a crazy, unexpected cancer, and in a year she passed away, but she really was the most fit woman that I had ever known, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, all of it. And so I never saw someone on TV that was older than 50, and I never saw my mom age. And so this was a real wild wilderness for me. And I'm so grateful. That's why I'm so loud about this, because if you would have told me when I was 30 or 40 that I'd talk about being older than 50, and I would have been like, you're crazy, because I'm so scared of that window, because I didn't want anyone to know how old I was. I'm scared that maybe they realize they let me sneak in. And so now I want these young women to be able to say, look at what it looks like. Not just that she's on TV, but that she's the happiest she's ever been, that she doesn't stop talking about her husband. They're so madly in love, and that I'm so in love with the opportunities I get now. And my life keeps changing because all these awesome things I'm doing that I needed to get to this age and stage. And so I weigh that, I wear that weight really proudly, because I needed it so much. I mean, there's a great chance if you're a woman that's older than 40 and you're on an airplane with me, or if you're at a line like in TSA, I'm going to talk about menopause. Like, I can't talk about it enough with women. Like, how are you? Like, what's your resources? Are you getting through it? Like, I never heard any talk like that. And I can't get over the fact that right now I feel like our generation is redefining this age. And someone the other day just said, how old did you feel? I'm like, how old do I feel? I feel 55. I don't want to feel any other age. I feel right now. And I want this to be the best age I've ever been at until 56. So I think I feel that in such a wonderful way about, not just like you said, not sports, but life, that we need women in our 50s. And I just keep asking my friends in their 60s, like, does it get better? Like, tell me it gets better, because no one told me 40s were great. No one told me 50s were great. So I kind of like reluctantly went in and then was surprised. And I'll just say this too. I thought I was handling the 40s great. I loved that decade. That was my decade of work. And I didn't know how I felt about 50. And my husband asked me, can I throw you a party for your 50th birthday? And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I don't know how I feel. And so I don't know if I'm celebrating, if I'm kind of kicking and screaming. So I'd rather not. And he said, that's fair. Could I have a bunch of people over to celebrate you and tell you have them tell you what you mean to them? And I was like, well, that sounds like a lovely night. And so that's how he ushered in my 50th birthday for me, was bringing all these people in to tell me how they felt about me, and the difference of going into 50 and going, how do I feel about it, versus what a beautiful life that I'm living right now. To have all these people want to be a part of this, because if I would have had a party at 40, nobody would have been there. I was just lonely and I was depressed and I didn't share myself and I hid behind my job and I didn't have any life then. So all of that to say, I can't get enough of women talking about how good it gets as we keep going with decades.
Mm-hmm. You know, I recently celebrated my 50th birthday, and Troy and the kids, they gave me a surprise birthday party. It was amazing. And I did a lot of work in my 40s, where I was really working on identifying my voice. What does Tommy like? What does Tommy not like? And I worked so hard to the point where I am not interested in what other people think or what other people have to say. And I say that because I don't know what the word was on the street about turning 50. It was good, it was bad. All I knew is I felt great, because I felt like I had reached this space in my life where I'm so focused. I know what I want to accomplish. I know what type of impact I want to leave in the earth. And that was my focus. So I didn't go into it like, oh man, I'm turning 50. Now, I will say my body definitely says something different than it did in the 40s and the 30s, for sure. But mentally, I am in such a great place that that's the part I want other women to get, that you get to this place in life where you just love you. You're grateful for every breath you have. You recognize that you have purpose and that you can do whatever it is you put your mind to do. Let's focus there and allow for your life experience to come forward so that it helps you to navigate the time that you have here on the earth. Use the wisdom that you got in your 20s, 30s, and 40s to be, to mold you and to help you with your decision-making process. So for me, that's been my approach to this new decade of my life. And I'm so grateful to be here. And then when I did turn 50, I had a friend of mine, she texted me and she said, oh, you're going to absolutely love it here.
Yes.
So
welcome to the party. Welcome to the good friend. It's a good, I love that. And it's like, how are we all not doing that for each other? And I do think we are now. I just think going back to, at some point, all those voices become your voice. I think, Tommy, if you didn't do the work and I didn't do the work at the 40s, like that would be right now the work. And so I can't get enough of these younger women going, I didn't get it until I was 40, wasn't supposed to get it a minute before that. But what if you can help a young woman at 23 or at 25 or 35? And so I just sit and go, I just sit and I think about the work that it takes to age. And I'm so grateful you and I did the work in the 40s, because I still have friends who haven't done the work yet that didn't ask about Tommy. They asked about the wife and the mother and the job, like all of those things. But the conversation about who am I without all of that, without those 34 seconds that I would have told you all my job titles. So I just know I always tell the story, but I didn't tell it for so many years. When I was 40 and I was on a plane, I thought the plane was crashing. And so we had the mask drop and the mask come down. And I was sitting there and I just was watching people, and I was watching them cry and pray and scream, and I didn't care. And when I started sharing that story, people would always interrupt and go, "Because you were at peace." And I'm like, "No, because I didn't care." And they'd say, "Because you accomplished so much." And I'd be like, "I didn't care if the plane crashed." And so that changed everything in my life, where thank God when we landed, I said, "Okay, I'm going to start doing this. Like, I've got to create a life that I would care desperately if, God forbid, if a plane went down." And Tommy, I think about this all the time. I think about people who have that moment, but the plane does crash. And just have that moment. And so I'm so grateful to have had that minute of that you've done the Super Bowls and you've done the Olympics and you're at a network and all those things I thought would make me so happy. And there I was, alone and miserable and didn't have any idea who I was. And so I'm so thankful for that. But most importantly, I'm so thankful it was it wasn't the plane crash, but just had that jolt of life. So I always just want to talk to women about that, of hopefully you don't need that jolt, but to really start doing that work about who is Tommy. And I'm going to guess that was hard for you in the beginning to not mention being a mom and not being a wife when you were saying that, or a chef, all the titles that you have earned and beautifully worn all those years.
Absolutely, it was. It was challenging because my identity was wrapped up in all of those things, and I did them very well. And so it was also something I was really proud of. And so it would be easy for me to talk about those things and talk about my husband and talk about my kids and what they accomplished, because it very much felt like my accomplishments as well. But it definitely was not who Tommy is. And so I had to really do the work of being able to identify those aspects of me so that I could show up that way. And the journey wasn't just a journey that impacted me, it impacted the people I loved as well, because they were accustomed to me showing up a certain type of way and also being accessible in a certain type of way. And when you do the work to really work on identifying who you are, you quickly learn there's some stuff you were doing. I really didn't enjoy doing that stuff. Yeah. And I don't want to do that anymore. I get the opportunity to choose when I recognize I like that, I don't like that. And, when you were talking about the plane and not caring if the plane went down, what it brought to mind to me is how we can be moving through life and there can be some amazing things taking place around us. But because we're checked out, just because we're just not in a good place and life doesn't feel good for us, we're missing the moments. So the good stuff is happening, but we're not experiencing the good stuff because we're not sitting in it looking at it like, wow, look at what's in front of me. We're just trying to get to the next step or get to the next day, get to the next week. And we're just moving through life with these blinders on, missing all of the amazing moments that create the memory bank that we get to pull from when we're having those tough times as we're continuing to matriculate through life.
That's so good. I always just said for so many years I was sleepwalking. Like that was it. And so exactly what you said, it's just, I was numb to everything. And also, this is such a woman thing. I didn't want to tell anybody any of this because I didn't want to appear ungrateful, because I was constantly told, like you, like, look at what you've accomplished and look at this job. And you just so badly didn't want anyone to think that you were ungrateful for it. And so just stuff it. And so it just not only forced me to sleepwalk, but also just put such a facade on. And what I would tell you is I'm really good at building relationships. Since I started this business, I have a relationship Tuesday, and that's all I do. One day a week. It's just literally building relationships. I have a huge whiteboard that I would keep track of, this is before emails, but who I'm reaching out to and making sure, that relationship building was really important. And I was really good at that. But if you would have turned around up until, 40, up until the playing, and asked any of those people, like, what do you think of Laura? And they'd be like, she's great. She reaches out, she's a vault. You can trust her with everything. You can just trust her. But if you would have then said, well, tell me about Laura. Is she happy? Is she married? Does she have kids? Does she have a dog? Is her mom alive? No one would have had any idea. And not because they didn't try, because people did. I just didn't let anybody in. And so just that whole sleepwalking or, just kind of going through life, it's such a lie. And so you're not letting anyone in to tell you that. And that bubble just kept getting bigger and bigger to me of, like you said, very cool, like being at a game watching Michael Jordan play, and very cool watching the flu game, and very cool being at the Olympics, but it didn't matter. It was just scenery for that bubble. But I was just so lonely inside of it. And that, and also, Tommy, like, tell me if you feel this. I feel so deeply now, I have goggles for sleepwalkers. You just see who's kind of going through the motion, and you just so desperately want to do that shake of, like, there's, like you said, there's so many moments that you're missing right now. But I just always think I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready until the exact minute I was ready to learn that. But it makes me really sad knowing that there's so many people out there going through the motions, and you just hope that they get that moment that they realize there's so much more. I'm so thankful you and I got to have that experience.
I am so grateful. So let's talk about GALvanize, because you have this army of thousands of young women that you have an opportunity to give them a gentle shake.
Sometimes not so gentle, Tommy. Sometimes it's a little harder.
So that they can wake up.
Yeah.
And they can experience life. They can experience the things and the goals and the dreams that they're pursuing, and they can do it well. So let's talk about GALvanize. If you could just share with everybody what it is and why you felt like, I have to do this.
I think I'm really grateful that the universe did everything to me around that 40 mark, because I started seeing at that age all these young women getting thrown into the sports industry, and very high and very fast. And I was watching this, and if I was younger, I would have been very judgmental, because I saw a lot of them getting thrown in and thrown out. And I saw a lot of them not being ready for it. And if I was younger, it would have been more about she wasn't ready and, like, she's not tough enough. But I was at a motherly age to, instead of being judgmental, I got very protective and was like, this isn't just crushing their confidence on a Sunday or Saturday. This is crushing their confidence. And so I started just saying, how can I help? And GALvanize, really, that was it. The genesis of GALvanize was, how can I help? And it started with 20 women in a room and just going, what can I do to help make your journey into this industry better? And it started out women on camera, which, was what I did so much of. But about a dozen years later, it's been over 5,000 women, and I get as young as maybe 19, and I get as old as 50s, women coming back for the dream. So I have all these women in every single facet of sports. And so it's not just on TV, it's not broadcasting, it's coaches and agents and PR and marketing and women who don't know what they want to do. And it really is everything I would have killed for. Like I said, it is an army of women to be supporting each other, and to help each other. And now it's been around long enough where they're hiring each other. They're each other's bridesmaids, they're godmothers to their children. And I started it when there just wasn't any groups out there. That was before all the women movement came. The women's movement really started. And so it was really just trying to go, how can I help them navigate an industry that's going to be really mean to them and really tough? And how do I make sure that they have somewhere to go? And so they're 2-day workshops, or it's a big seminar. And what I would tell you is, we never talk sports. it's all confidence. It's confidence in who you are. It's confidence in other women. And it's doing all the things you and I are talking about. How do you train your voice to be a loving one? How do you make sure you're not competing with other women and that you're supporting other women? Well, in essence, you are competing with other women. And how do you make sure that you are very clear in who you are, as you are going to be told by a million different people in a million different ways who they want you to be. So it's women in sports, but Tommy, it doesn't matter. Like it could be women in engineering. It could be women in food industry. It could be women in whatever it is. It's just women navigating the world and having a great sisterhood around them, that feels safe. And the best part for me is I don't have children, and I feel every day like I have thousands of them now. So I've always been passionate about my job. I still love it, but GALvanize gave me a purpose, which was much bigger than me and something I was desperately needing while I was doing the work.
So Laura, when you talked about at that time when you were looking around at what was taking place with the women coming into sports, they were advancing fast and being thrown out just as quickly as they were coming in. Was that par for the course in the industry, or was that just really, was it gender specific?
The industry, because it's kind of, the good news is all of a sudden places were being held accountable for having no women, right? And so it was kind of, we need women. And so they started kind of throwing, what I would say is they started throwing women in, and on one hand, yay, there was more women. And on the other hand, just going, they're going to get a sweet gig, but they're not going to build a career. They're not ready. And so I would say in our industry, but I'm sure we could throw a whole lot more in there. It was just women who, I would have loved to have seen them. I'll say it this way. So Pam Oliver is one of my closest friends and one of my heroes. And Pam has been doing sidelines longer than anybody. And it's just, is the North. And Pam has a foundation, and I had a foundation. We did local news. We became reporters. We became journalists. And then you worked your way to do the sidelines for the NFL on Fox, which was and is a really big deal. But what started happening was the sideline position started becoming a young woman's position. And that's where they kind of threw everybody. But before they're journalists, before they are reporters, before they really know the game that they're covering. And so again, I knew I wasn't going to change the cycle. It was moving very fast. But what I wanted to make sure of was that they had somebody to call and go, how can I be ready for this? How do I prepare? What questions can I ask? And I had NFL coaches saying that to me, that there's a young, adorable woman at halftime, but she doesn't know what I'm saying. And I don't know what she's saying, but she reminds me of my daughter. So I want to be kind to her. And that was like so that's when I said, I really needed to help. But I mean, I'd say that's sports broadcasting or that's sports journalism, but that's kind of the world, right? Of all of a sudden going, let's throw these women into this position. And instead of looking and going, let's make sure that they're ready for this. And I just know that when I first started in this business, Tommy, I would go around and I would count women because I could. And so anytime I would go to a Super Bowl, or if I would go to the Olympics, I'd count women and it was one hand. And then I got to two hands and that was awesome. And now I could never count. There's so many women. But if we went and counted all the women in power and the women who had voices and the women who make an impact, the women of color, then I'm going to go, we're back to this again.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of the wave of let's get women in, but it just hasn't moved forward since that, which was something that took me a little while to notice. And then now go again, how can we help? How can we do something about that to make sure more diverse voices are being heard in our industry?
When you're talking about like this place where opportunities are being presented and for whatever reason, people may receive the opportunity, but they're not prepared to actually step into the moment. You've been doing this now for decades. And clearly it's not because someone has done you a favor. You've done the work. You do what is necessary so that you can be excellent at what you do, to be one of the best doing it. What would you share with someone in regards to how to prepare so that you can have longevity in what you're doing?
I mean, I could give the answer about preparation, right? Like, I know you're the same. I'm obsessed with it. Like I still have the reoccurring nightmare of showing up for an interview I didn't know about. Like that obsession with being prepared is real. That's who I am at my fiber, no matter what I'm doing. I've done boot camps with GALvanize where we've talked about preparations and how to ask questions and how to build relationships, and all of that is so important. But at the end of the day, I would say when I really became the best version of me, when my interviews started being conversations, when my relationships stopped being contacts and sources and started being true relationships, and when I started asking good questions and listening, all of that was because I suddenly knew who I was. I did so much work. And again, of who do I want to be? I want to be a pro. I want to make sure that every room I'm in, if someone doesn't like me in the 50s, I'm fine with that. But everyone in the room better respect me and better respect my voice and better respect what I bring to the table. And I think that, to me, getting all these young women right now is the first thing I try to work with them on, which is, let's set your bar. Who are you? And what's important right now for when you walk out of the room, how people talk about you. And I think I got that at a younger age. I cared desperately about if people liked me. That came later. But being told that no one wants you in a room for a long time, you really work hard to make sure that you've earned it. And so I would say that preparation, my easy answer is the preparation and building relationships and all of that. But honestly, my true answer is, who do you want to be when you walk out of the room? And what do you want people to say about you? And I'm happy to say, if you talk to someone who I work with currently, or if you go to someone who I worked with 33 years ago, they would say I wasn't very good, and they would say I was in over my head, which is true. But I think what they'd also say is, but she was a pro. And that was my mom's voice in me, of making sure that I knew who, that I knew how I treated people was extremely important, and being prepared was extremely important. And I think that's probably what I go to now, which is, it's not about what you do. It's about who you are, which it's your who, not your do, is kind of GALvanize language.
You talked about your relationship Tuesdays that you have now. When you said that, it immediately stood out to me, because I'm definitely a relationship person and not transactional.
Yeah.
And as you're talking about the whole piece of being prepared and being the pro, I'm like, that's a masterclass. That relationship piece and being able to teach people how to be in relationship with other people, especially professional relationships, it's a skill that I don't know that people get the benefit of really learning today, because career wise, people aren't where they used to be as long. They're going from one place to the next pretty quickly, and just trying to find their way to the next spot they want to be in life. And so they don't get an opportunity to really dig their heels in and build. And I don't know that people have a whiteboard in their office like you do, where you're actually planning out how you're going to engage with relationships and cultivate those relationships. Because I'm sure after 30 years and more, you recognize that those relationships you've been building have come full circle on many occasions, and you can pick up the phone and you can make stuff happen because you know the art of building relationships. Talk to us about that.
I love that you say this. So I do a lot of speaking now outside of sports, and this is the topic that I'm hired to talk about the most. And it's with major companies, and it always amazes me because it's something that I've been doing so long, and it's such a core part of me. And then I realize exactly what you said. Most people are asking, can you teach me how to do that? And what I will always say is, relationship building is the most important part of my job, but it's a job. Like, if you really want to do it right, it is intentional. And it is very much a skill, like you said. And I learned it as a young reporter. I called Charles Barkley, and Charles picked up the phone and said, well, Laura Okmin, what do you need? And I was like, huh, like, what, can't a girl just call and say hello? And he said, a girl can, you just never do. What do you need? And he's like, I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to give you grief. I'm just saying when you call, you need something. And that crushed me, even as a young reporter, because I thought, why else would I call him? I'm not going to say like, good game or how was your weekend? And, navigating lines and all of that. And so I didn't know why I would call. So I just did it. But that instantly woke me up to, well, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the one that when someone looks at the phone and they're like, ugh, what does Laura want? And so everything from that moment as a young woman turned into, how do I make sure that I'm not that person? And so it's been 30 years of not just as a woman navigating that, because that has lines and grayness and that you have to navigate too, but also as a reporter, because how do you make people happy to see you, especially now in a time where people are, how they feel about the media. And so it really, you have to work on all these skills to make sure that they're not looking at you as a reporter, that they're not looking at your phone, that you're not reaching out just when you need anything. And I just know that one of the first things that I did to really help me with that, back to when I was 40, but I started realizing the place that I was wasting my connections and my conversations were airplanes, because I was on them all the time and I didn't talk to people. I was always on them. And so I didn't want to talk. My job is asking questions and asking people. So I just didn't want to have those conversations on an airplane. And so I'd put my music on and I'd work. But I started challenging myself and going, I'm going to see how many conversations and connections I missed all these years flying, and who knows who I was sitting next to. And so I made a rule that I would have to start connecting with people on airplanes, but I could not talk about a job. Like, it was all who, not do. And that was the one rule that I had. And I would tell them that, like, that's the one thing, I won't do. And no exaggeration, Tommy. So the first person I did that with introduced me to my husband. The second person I did that with is now one of my closest friends. And her and her husband were the first people to say to me, would you ever do some communications coaching? And I was like, I never thought about that. And they were like, we think you'd be really good. So the husband hired me for something, and that changed the trajectory of my life. And then the third person, my husband produces movies, and this gentleman I sat with, they wound up producing a movie together. So 3 people who were at my wedding, and 3 people who changed my life. And I always think about, before I challenged myself to do that, I would have either talked work or I would have not talked. And you just kind of start thinking about, what would your life be? And I'll say one other thing about why it's so important about not talking about your job. So the second person, the woman who I'm friends with, we were flying cross country and we just started talking, and she was about 10 years older than me, but our lives were mirroring each other. And we were talking about moms dying young, and we were talking about terrible divorces, and we were talking about a place I went to that was magical for me, that I had one of the biggest, moments of my life. And she had gone there and had her own magical moment there. And so we're just mirroring, and we weren't talking work. And finally we switched numbers, and we both said, we're not great with connecting, with like girlfriends, and let's change numbers and let's commit to this. Like, we're supposed to be together. And so as we had that conversation, we were starting to deplane, or starting to go down. And she was asking me a question, and I said, I'm going to break the rule. I just think we're probably in the same worlds. So can I just ask you, what world are you in? And she said, my husband's in the world of sports. And I was like, got it. Like, makes sense. We kept talking, and I finally was like, I got to ask, because I know, like, we're speaking the same language. And I said, what world? And she said, my husband owns, and it's a Major League Baseball team. And I say to this day, if we would have started with her saying that and me saying I was a reporter, we would have never talked. We would have been like, let's stay away. And so it's so important building relationships, about knowing who you are and connecting with other people and who they are, because the work stuff gets in the way. The titles, the who do you know, the what's your experience. It's a way to size each other up. But building relationships and doing it so genuinely, and not about what can I get from this, to me really is the secret sauce. And it always has been and always will be.
I agree. So before we go to our next segment, I have one final question for you. If you had younger Laura sitting across from you, young in her career, she just had the conversation with the coach who um, tried to indicate that she was not the one. What type of shaking
Yeah.
would you give her in that moment and pep talk so that she would stay the course in a way that she didn't know how to?
I don't think I would have. I wouldn't have. I wouldn't shake her. I would hug her. I think,
Mm,
right? Like I so badly needed a hug. I so badly needed my mom. I so
mm,
badly needed a woman, especially. But I needed a woman in my ear telling me that I was doing the best that I could. And I was so hard on myself. And I lost my mom so young, but I'm so grateful, Tommy, that I know you're like this, that I had a woman who raised me telling me constantly I was so wonderful and telling me
mm,
I was prettier on the inside and telling me not to compare myself to other women and mean girls and I just had a mom that wasn't here long enough, but she filled me with all of that. And so when I lost all of that for a long time, I think I don't know anymore. Like when I find, when I finally found my voice and my confidence, I don't know if it was me or I don't know if it's my mom. That like, all of a sudden all of that taking root. But so I would say that it would have been such a hug, and I don't even know if I would have if she would need to hear anything except feel a woman's arms around her and telling her,
mm,
that she's doing the best that she could. Boy, did I need that. But who doesn't, right?
mm-hmm. And that type of that moment for someone lasts a lifetime. When you're in desperate need of something and someone gives it to you, it hits right at the right moment and it will last forever. Like you'll remember that every time you start feeling that way, you'll remember the hug. You'll remember the words that encourage you, and it'll be the fuel for your rocket you need to keep going, just to keep going.
Yeah.
So, in this segment of our conversation, it is titled, I'm Bringing Her to the Table with Me. It is your opportunity to give another woman her virtual flowers because you would not be where you are today without her fingerprint on your life.
It's such a hard one because obviously it's my mom. Like if you gave me one seat at the table, there's nobody else that I would grab, with apologies to my husband. But I would grab my mom. And this is what makes me sad about that answer because I want to tell you somebody who's instrumental in my career. And I want to tell you somebody who did help me get from, that 22-year-old, young girl over her head to a 55-year-old woman who's been doing it a really long time. But I don't have one. And it's just, I grew up in a time where there just weren't women mentors. We were all just trying to make our own way. So it wasn't that it was a cattiness, and I get really defensive when people talk about that. It wasn't because we were catty or trying to take each other out. It was because we were just looking down and just trying to put one foot in front of the other. So what I would say is, the flowers go to me. The flowers go to me going, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you can do this. And so I would take the flowers because our generation never gets those flowers. We didn't get
Mm-hmm.
them. And now we spend our life giving them to all these young women to make sure they get the flowers we didn't. And that yet sometimes I look around and go, but then where are our flowers? Like we're still not getting the flowers. So there are women in my life right now, Pam and Oliver. Like I'm so thankful for Pam and thankful Pam and I weren't close when we started. And then the older we got and the more we respected each other and the more that we felt each other. Like I can't imagine not having Pam. And, and there's women now who I cradle, and just go, they're terrific at this moment, but I don't have anyone that grew up with me. Is that sad or is that like that's just this generation?
I believe it brings us right back to the beginning of our conversation where, you were looking for someone and it was you were looking for all along. And
Good
so
stuff.
you deserve those flowers.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I think.
I'd still say, Tommy, like right now, if you said bring women to the table, like there's young women I'm obsessed with, and like Sam Rappaport from the NFL, who does so
Mm-hmm.
much for women in football, Kendall Coyne Schofield, who does so much for women in hockey. And I've watched these two young women like help grow their trees, all these branches, and do what they've done for women. And they did it in their 20s and 30s. And I'm in awe of that because I didn't hit that until 40. So there's so many women that I want to throw flowers at because they're doing so much so early. But I feel like we need the biggest table in the world to have women 50 plus, and not saying who, and not saying who else you're giving the flowers to, but making sure that we're handing them to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Hey, look, maybe we need to create that event where we're creating this table filled with flowers for the 50 and over crew.
I love that. We need it more than anybody. And imagine the power that would be in the room. Like imagine
Mm,
all the women finally feeling their power and finally being able to use their voice. I'm in.
yes.
And
Yes.
menopause. We're talking about menopause.
So going into our final segment, which is food is love. I already know we've talked about this. You're not in the kitchen chefing it up. So we're going to just change it up a little bit
I love it.
so that we can come into your wheelhouse.
Thank
So
you.
if you could, I know that you talked about you lost your mother when you were 24 years old. What meal did your mom make when you were growing up that when you think about it, it just brings a smile to your face?
Gosh, there's so much. There's so much. But this is what's so sad. It's little girl food, right? Like it was the spaghetti and butter, and
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it was, growing up with here's what I'll say. I told you I had stomach surgeries when I was young, and so I always have had a complicated relationship with food. And so what I'm so appreciative is my brothers were sitting here, they would say all the wonderful things she made for them. And yet mine was the butter with noodles, like whatever was so basic and just no flavor at all. Um, but here's what I would also say. I've been thinking about this so much with knowing that I was coming on the show and hoping that I didn't have to talk about my cooking, but food and family is everything. And what I think about with my mom is two things. I think about I didn't have a job for a year after I graduated college. It took me a year to have someone believe in a woman in sports. And so I lived at home, and I'm so thankful for that now. But my mom and I had a Tuesday night dinner that we would do every week, that it was just her and I going into the city, into Chicago. And we would go to this wonderful Italian place that isn't there anymore. And it was like out of The Godfather. It was just incredible, people watching and the food. And it was the first time and my only time that I got my mom as a woman. And I still wasn't one, but it still was being able to talk to her about her marriage, even, about things that I finally kind of graduated to a different level of being a friend, maybe a little bit more than a snotty little teenager. And so I'm really thankful for that table in that restaurant for that year, every Tuesday, of getting to see my mom as a woman instead of my mom, because that was just a little glimpse that I got, and now I crave it so much. And the other thing, Tommy, was that year she was sick, she wasn't eating, and it was cancer, and food became complicated again. And
Mm-hmm.
there was a little restaurant right down the street that she would go to, but she started not having the energy to go. And they would make her soup every day for me to come over, my dad to come over and bring her a soup that she would love and try to make her eat. And it was just from them falling in love with her and having her in the neighborhood and wanting to make her happy and wanting to give her soup. And so that was also, as a young woman, seeing people take care of people and seeing that it was nothing more, and they would never let us pay for it. Just a huge thing of like different kind of soups, of just wanting to love on my mom. And so I think about, like, that was such a big thing for me, of how you treat people and that relationship. So I can't have lemon soup or chicken noodle soup. Or just like there's certain soups that I can't have without thinking about all that time of how hard it was and awful it was, and yet the kindness of people.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about this table for these women who are deserving of flowers. So I want you to think about this table. It's full of flowers. There are enough seats for everyone to take a seat there. And I want you to tell us what the spread is on the table.
Can I just ask you what you would like to
You might not eat all the food, but I know you see food and you're like, man,
I wish I could
eat that. Yeah.
I'm going to after this.
So if there was foods that you could eat, you know, like if your stomach wasn't an issue and you're like, man, this table would be full of these dishes, what would it be?
It's so funny. I can't wait to tell my husband how amazing this whole conversation has been. But when I tell him you asked me this, he is going to laugh so hard because he's going to be like, did you tell her peanut butter yogurt? Like, did you tell her Chipotle? What did you tell her? I mean, I would eat something fried. I haven't had fried since probably I was 10. So like the idea of having fried chicken and having mashed potatoes with gravy and like having a salad with bacon and like having like real food like that, which would put me into a hospital, into a bed for 2 days. But honestly, it would probably be something fried and so bad for me. Because I haven't, the last time I had that was a New Year. I spent a New Year's alone, and it was probably when I was about 25, probably right when my mom died. And I said I was going to go get Kentucky Fried Chicken because I wanted to just do something that felt good and comfort food and something that reminded me of my childhood. And Tommy, I was in bed for 2 days after that. So that was the last time I've had anything fried, was trying to treat myself to some Kentucky Fried Chicken. But that would be it. Something unhealthy and something delicious with gravy and fried and something comfort that reminded me of my childhood.
Okay.
Is that the saddest answer you've gotten? Be honest.
No. So first of all, that's the first time I asked that question. So you set the standard for the answer.
So low. I will cater Chipotle for everybody. That is my grand gesture.
Laura, I am so grateful for our time today at the table. Please share with everyone where they can learn more about all of the amazing work that you're doing and how they can stay in contact with you.
I love it. My website is lauraokmin.com, and that is all my information and all my GALvanize information. What I always say now is if you're interested in GALvanize, there's a lot there, and there's an email that you can send your information to. But I'm not just saying that to my women in their 20s and 30s. I'm like, are you in your 50s? Are you in your 40s? Let's do a whole thing with women who are older. And those are some of my favorite 2-day experiences. So if you are looking for an army of women and looking for a really cool couple days and partnering with some NFL teams and helping rookies figure out who they are and not talking football, then GALvanize could be something wonderful for my girls and for my women.
Well, thank you again. Thank you so much. And just know that you are welcome to come and stay a while anytime.
I will never leave, Tommy. I wish you didn't say that to me. You're going to be like, I didn't mean this whole time. This has been so meaningful, and I can't tell you how much I've appreciated this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I hope you felt the love and connection in today's conversation. Every woman you heard from has faced the impossible and emerged stronger. This is your personal invitation to stay a while longer at TommyV.com. That's TOMMIV.com for more inspiration for your mind, body, and soul. And let's not forget your belly. You're always welcome at my table. Please be sure to subscribe, make yourself at home, and stay a while.